Thank you, and through you, Chair Lloyd. Before trustees tonight is an information report that tries to describe the situation with regards to the status of the Barrie Central mechanical heating plant. There have been considerable considerations to this report from a variety of areas of our board staff, from school staff, superintendents, to maintenance staff, to planning staff, and certainly also with regard to how things operate at the school, a variety of other sources. At this point, and it's mentioned in this report, in December 2010, and I believe it was an item of conversation at this table, if not a report, a contingency plan was discussed because of the what we saw as being the imminent failure of the Barrie Central mechanical heating plant. This past year, we saw part of the mechanical cooling plant go down. It is a location that requires consistent monitoring and consistent service calls to maintain. It is one that we have simplified to a certain extent by calling it boilers. It is not just boilers, it is the full mechanical heating plant. In fact, one of the more critical elements is the piping that goes into those boilers. The boilers have a built-in redundancy, which means that if one goes down, we can move to the other because there are two on location. But it also means that these are service calls that could take place. So looking towards the future, we believe it was important that we have a contingency plan in case something takes place. But as is referenced in this report, it is our preferred situation that students remain at Barrie Central until the closure on June 30th, 2016, at which time they would be located. In the meantime, we also wanted to make sure that trustees understood how this could take place, and that we had some planning taking place already. Contact has been made with the Ministry of Education with regard to an alternative time plan. The director would be involved if there's a temporary closure, but it's also one that if it extends very long, we need to be able to move forward on this. One of the key elements in here is as was mentioned before, was boilers. And the previous version of this was the reference to a portable boiler. It is one situation that certainly we could undertake, but we do not necessarily need to undertake until we get to that point. And so the contingency planning, as is outlined in this report, tries to take into account of most of the scenarios that could take place. That does not mean that we will have all of them covered, but it certainly outlines through the maintenance staff, design and construction staff, planning staff, as well as the academic staff, that we are looking towards being ready to move if the situation arises. Certainly happy to answer any question.
Thank you. Trustee May, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Thank you very much for this report. It's great to know that there's been a great thought with the contingency plan, just in case. I remember back, it's probably been a couple of years now, when we were talking about these boilers, if we had to rent portable boilers, the cost of that. Do you remember the cost of that? Is it in there? Apologize. Yeah, $15,000 a month rental charge. And is that, yeah, I apologize, I didn't see that in there. I remember that being quite substantial. So with us coming into hopefully not a winter like we had last year, it's nice to know that this plan is in place. Thank you.
Trustee Lay, please, and then Trustee Locke.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Superintendent Dance. I'm referring to page 2 of the report, where we talk about the two possibilities for boiler replacements. The second option, it indicates that the estimated time to install would be 2 to 3 weeks, but I don't see anywhere in the first option where it indicates what the time frame would be.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Lloyd, to Trustee Lay, certainly that would be a different situation, because then it would be a situation where we'd have to remove the roof and be able to take the boiler out and then replace it with another boiler dropping down. And staff in reviewing this situation would be one where we would probably err towards the second one, which would be a portable boiler. And it's not just the access to a portable boiler, it's also the connection of the portable boiler to the piping where the existing boilers are. So in a contingency plan such as this, certainly the analysis of staff is that the acquisition and use of a portable boiler would be the preferred location simply because the timelines would be shorter. It would be an extensive project to be able to take out a boiler and put another boiler in. And as is referenced in this report, asbestos is an area that's within this building is considerable concern, and it will always be a matter that we have to deal with. So if a catastrophic failure takes place, that also has to be in front of mind. That would mean the closure of the school while construction took place of any nature, and then be able to move back in afterwards.
Follow-up, Trustee Lang?
And in the event of a situation like you just referenced, you would have no understanding at this point of the time frame that would involve, or would you?
And Dan?
Through you, Chair Lloyd, Trustee Lang, no, I don't have the exact timeline.
Okay, Trustee Locke, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Superintendent Dance, which sort of follows up on Trustee Lay's question. So if we took the first contingency option, we're talking about asbestos going through the roof, what would we do with the students for that length of time while that was being installed?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Lloyd, Trustee Locke, that would be a situation where we'd have to consider the length of time, be able to estimate how long students would be out. And it could be a situation where the students would return to Barrie Central after repairs are effected, or as referenced in this report, temporary relocation to Barrie North. One of the key things that we have to keep in mind with, and it's certainly something that working with Superintendent Samus and certainly the principals of both Barrie North and Barrie Central, is the importance of making sure that students are able to continue to progress towards credits. That is one of the aspects as to why the schedule has been built the way it is, because it provides temporary relocation with the also ensuring the interests of the students being able to continue towards their graduation requirements, whether they're in grade 9 or grade 12, it's still, the requirement is 110 hours for a credit. And so that has to be scheduled hours. If a temporary relocation is needed, this would fit that situation. That does not take into account how much longer we would need to do. We have to work with the Ministry of Education in order to find that solution as we go forward into a longer term relocation.
Thank you. Trustee Smith, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I was reading the contingency plan, one of the things that struck me was that there was a very large assumption within the document, and that was that, in fact, there was going to be some place to send these school children, that the government was, in fact, going to give the $20 million. Because, in fact, I think there should be a contingency plan based upon the fact that the government may not give the $20 million. And then what do you do with all these children? And what do you do if the South Barrie School doesn't end up being built till 2018 because we can't buy the land and we can't build the school and we don't get all the things we need in place? So I'm a little bit concerned that a contingency plan is built upon assumptions that are not even really clearly detailed, because there should be a totally other contingency plan available. So what happens if the boilers break and it's past 2016? What happens if it's 2018 when we finally get that school up and running and we don't get the money for Barrie Central to be consolidated into the other schools? Because after all, Simcoe County has received an awful lot of money over the years, far more than our fair share probably for the province. So can you tell me, is there a contingency plan if we don't get the money for the consolidation?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Lloyd, Trustee Smith, contingency planning is one that in situations such as this, and as has been referenced before, Barrie North is under capacity right now. It would be a situation where we would take a look at, pending the results of the attendance area review, the numbers of students that would be relocated. One of the key elements in this is that there is an extended French program that's located at Barrie Central, and it's one that it would be our intention that it would move completely as a group and not have to start over again and be split up into different locations. But those are elements of which, as certainly from our perspective, we're trying to go through the mechanical situation, and we will continue to come up with other scenarios as they arise. We believe that we could be ending up with more portables in different locations, if that's the case, and that would be a situation that as we would move forward, we would deal with. Portables are not the end solution, but I have to emphasize that the construction of South Barrie Secondary School is a totally separate business case. The students that would be moving to South Barrie Secondary School would be students, from our plans at least at this time, would not be related to the Barrie Central students. It would be a different group of students who are wholly housed in the Innisdale attendance area now.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Locke, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question of clarification. The contingency plan is based on the mechanical issues at Barrie Central. Is that not correct?
Thank you. That is correct.
Do I have any others? Oh, Trustee Armstrong, please.
Just a quick question. In regards to the imminent failure, because we're talking about that 2010, so we're 2014, so imminent for mechanical issues. It's at a 10-year time frame, it's hard to know. But does the weather conditions have any impact on these boilers? And we did go through a rather harsh winter last year, so if we can all pray for a mild winter, would that be helpful? Or does it really matter? I guess the other part is the operating or stationary operating engineer. Is there one on call? I don't think we employ one, but are they hard to get? I guess the issue is to keep the boilers if they're in good working condition as of today, and hopefully they just keep going. We'll never have to deal with this situation. It's really based on the operations of those two boiler units.
Superintendent Dan.
Thank you. And through you, Chair Lloyd, Trustee Armstrong. Very good question. In fact, it's probably better for the boilers to have cold weather, simply because they're in operation. We have had a number of incidents, specifically earlier this week, where one boiler had to be, the heat had to be switched over from one to the other. That is the positive situation with regard to having two boilers. As is mentioned in the report, there's built-in redundancy. Our challenge is not necessarily, as I've said before, and I've said tonight, I believe, it's not just the boilers, it's the connecting links, which are the pipes. If pipes were to burst near to where the boilers are, that would create a catastrophic failure for us, more so than the boilers. At this point, there is considerable manpower being put into maintaining these. We do not need a stationary engineer because of the rating of these two boilers, but it's one that, because if, and trustees from around the table will recall from Associate Director McCauley was part of the conversation, I believe, the establishment of the burner unit on the boiler being moved over from one boiler to the other was a factor. And so we think it's a better situation, and cold weather, in fact, shows us when it's going to work and not work. As I mentioned earlier, this week we did have one go down, and so we were able to switch over to the other. Parts have been ordered for the boiler that is not working at this point, but we did not see substantial loss of heat over a longer period of time is what would happen if it was the whole system going down. Redundancy works for our benefit, and cold weather, knowing it's running, once it's up and going, it's good news.
Director Balls, please, and then Trustee Lake.
Through you, Chair. I didn't want to lose, though, the comment about a contingency plan about if we didn't get the funding. And most certainly as a board and as a staff, we will most certainly, we're very helpful, fingers crossed, as we always are when we put in our business cases. We feel they've been very strong. We give them the information they're looking for, and we, as a result, I believe, have been very successful with the dollars that this board has received. However, if we don't get the dollars, then we most certainly would come back to this board with, then now what? And so then another plan would come forward to explain with trustees and explain to the communities then what would be other alternatives to this. So I didn't want to lose that piece, because absolutely that's what we would have to then do. But we're very hopeful, and we believe that we will know sooner rather than later about where these dollars will go. But we never know when they're going to finally announce. But we know we've got it in on time, we've got a strong business case, and so we'll just have to wait and see.
Thank you. And Trustee Lake, please.
Thank you, Chair Lloyd. And through you to Superintendent Dance. I have read this report twice. I just skimmed it a third time, and I see no references that would directly relate to the contingency plan and funding that we're hoping to get. Can you point out to me where in the report it indicates that that funding is part of this report?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Lloyd to Trustee Lay, it's not referred to. This is certainly planning on our basis as a facility, and certainly with the academic staff, Superintendent Samus and the principals of 2 schools, is certainly looking for accommodations for those students. It's a separate issue.
Thank you very much, because I was confused when I saw some of the options that you listed, and I didn't believe that you list some of these options if you were basing this on funding that you felt was coming forward. So I was confused, but I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
And Trustee Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Director for clarifying that we don't have a contingency plan for if we don't get the money for for Barrie North, because it's really important, because the contingency plan for the plant only goes out 2 years, and if we don't get a $20 million piece of cash, we need a bigger contingency plan that deals with what we do with the students, because in fact the students are the key here. The students are what we're here for, and a plan that deals with just the boilers is not the whole and all of everything. In fact, it's the students, and the Director kindly explained that they will be providing a contingency plan for what to do if they don't get the money. I think it would be a very good idea to actually produce it now, because contingency plans are supposed to be there just in case. And I think it'd be very valuable to the public to see what the contingency plan is, should there be no money and where will the kids go.
Dr. Wallace? To you, Chair. With all due respect, we would not want to confuse our population and parents regarding what plans we are putting forward. So I believe this is a short turnaround of whether we will get these dollars or not. And therefore, I think that in this short span of time, we're putting forward a plan that is demonstrating that as a staff, we are very much taking into consideration what would happen. And certainly I would share with you as a director, I don't want to get this phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning finding out that we have boilers down and no heat in the school without a plan. So that's paramount to our students, to know what would happen, and to our parents in both of these schools, to know these are the possibilities. So this is why this is here right now. But absolutely, and I believe this staff has demonstrated to this table over and over again, we do have plans in place. And let me assure you that, for example, Barrie North has always been used to be on a 5-period schedule all the time. It used to have more students that are currently in that building. And so there are other alternatives that we can turn to. We still have secondary schools in our system that do have 5-period days, 5 periods in their day. So there is opportunities for us to work with the staff, work with the community to come up with that plan. But that plan, we will have in place, I assure you. But I believe right now we're extremely hopeful that we will have those dollars in order for us then to send that plan out to families and to our students so that they would know what that is. And I don't really want to confuse people over this very short period of time.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions on this at this point in time? Okay, so that moves us on to items number 5, which is Barrie Central and Prince of Wales property options for use. And that is Superintendent Sloan this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Lloyd. Trustees will recall that at the October 1st Business and Facilities meeting, the report indicated that staff would be bringing to a future Business and Facilities Standing Committee potential options for the future continued use of Barrie Central Collegiate Institute and Prince of Wales properties or their disposition. So in front of you tonight is that report with the options, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing this information because we had requested it, so that's important. Questions or comments from trustees at this point in time? Trustee Armstrong.
Just
for clarification,
You present the options, but what I'm trying to find out is the time frame when those options have to be decided upon. It's certainly not now, but I'm just wondering, are we talking 2015 or early 2015, late 2015? So just the time frame of when those options can be decided upon.
Superintendent Sloan, please.
Thank you, and through the chair to Vice Chair Stephen Armstrong. There's no time limit implied here. In fact, as option A suggests, you could sit on it for quite some time.
Thank you. So in other words, the Board of Trustees can set the timeframes for this.
To you, Chair Lloyd, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Smith?
Madam Chair, I was just wondering if Superintendent Sloan might explain the process of actually how one sells property, just because it's, I think, of interest to a lot of people and it's not necessarily clear, or different superintendent. Thank you. To answer before it's offered to in the order it's offered.
Thank you. That's a good question. Superintendent Jess, please.
Thank you, Chair Lloyd, and through you. Ontario Regulation 44498 clearly specifies the process for disposition of property. And under that disposition process, we'd be first required to offer it to what I often refer to as a preferred list, and that's a list of 12 or 15 public sector entities that would, if they're interested in purchasing any property that was being disposed of by the board, would have to provide notice to the board within 90 days. In the event that we did not receive an entity off that preferred list or an offer of purchase off that preferred list, then we'd certainly go to open market, so to speak. So I do have the preferred list in front of me if you really want to know who's on it. Certainly includes the municipal. There is a priority order, but included on that list are other boards, other school boards, separate school boards, French boards, college. If there is a college in the municipality, in our case there is with Georgian. Also on the list is university that has its home office closest to the property. In this case, York University, in the event of Barrie Central or Prince of Wales. There's some others. There's upper tier municipalities. The city of Barrie would be on the list. And they are in priority order. So if we receive an offer from more than one of the entities on the list, we're required to entertain the offer of purchase from the entity that is higher up in the priority listing. In the event within 30 days we can't get a deal done with that potential buyer, then we would be eligible to move on to anybody else further down on the list that did put in an offer of purchase.
Thank you. Just for clarification, can you tell me how the value of the land is determined, or what the price is? Because I know I often hear misinformation in the public as to how that's determined. So can you just clarify that, please?
Certainly, through you, Chair Lloyd. So in the event that somebody were to offer us $1, we have an appraised value on the properties. We would then have 30 days to sit down and try to negotiate a deal that was acceptable to both parties in terms of the sale price. In the event that we're unable to do that within the 30-day period, and barring binding arbitration on such an arrangement, we would certainly have the opportunity to move on to, as I suggest, another entity that may be on that preferred list, or in the event there wasn't another entity, then to move to open market.
Okay, and I think Trustee Main, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Superintendent Jess. Can you just clarify what you just said? There's a list and there's a priority. So say 2 people offered us, and you said the preference would be given to who was higher on the list, it wouldn't necessarily be the person who gave us the highest offer.
And through you, Chair Lloyd, in terms of the negotiations, we would be required to negotiate first with the entity that is higher up on the preferred priority list. In the event we are unable to secure a deal, as I say, within 30 days, then we would certainly have the option of moving down and selecting or starting to negotiate with the entity that is next highest on the list. In the event we have a third, if we can't get a deal with number 2, we would then have the opportunity to move after 30 days to the third entity that, in terms of the priority.
Trustee May, please.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to that then. In this priority list, you have the first group that, before it goes to the public, would we have a right to release, try to sell, and if we're not finding if we're not getting what we need or not getting fair value or whatever, can we then, okay, we're not ready to sell? Do we have that option before, or does it automatically have to go to the public?
And through you, Chair Lloyd, the normal process would be that it would go to open market and we would try to get a deal. If we weren't able to get one off of the preferred priority list, then it would go to open market. And but at any point in time, there's no requirement for the board to accept any deal. Normally we would if we got something that was certainly in the fair market value range, and we would look to our appraisals in order to help guide that decision.
Okay, and Trustee Lay, please.
Thank you, Chair Lloyd. Through you, I think to Superintendent Jeffs. I received a phone call in the last week or so indicating that the person had knowledge that if we were to sell the property, that it would be, that there's a law that says we would have to offer it to another school board for $1 maximum. Can you clarify that?
Superintendent Jeffs, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Lloyd, I'm not aware of that being the circumstance, and I just looked to Manager Few in the crowd, and he gave me the proverbial shake of the head, so I'm not aware, and nowhere in 44498 is that referenced, and I suspect if that were the case, it would certainly be included in that internal regulation.
Follow-up, Trustee Lay?
Actually, I have a second question. Can you explain to me, I know one year when I sat here, I think we were given, we had about $7 million for maintenance for all of our schools, like regular maintenance. Can you tell me what amount of money would be allocated to any school that is closed? Does the ministry have a different amount of money that you can maintain that school with, or how do we maintain a school once it's closed? Is there funds available that are specific to that?
Superintendent Dance, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Lloyd, to Trustee Lay. In the case of schools that are closed, we maintain those out of operating funds. So it's not a renewal basis. So the recently closed Alliston Union Public School is being maintained at a subsistence level. Pipes are closed off. Heating is a basic level, and we pay those bills through our regular operating funds. That's an example of one, but it's also one where certainly it becomes, depending on the size of the property, it also becomes a challenge to continue to put those funds out for a closed building.
So if I understand correctly, we would be taking that out of our regular maintenance money, and that would be money that would potentially be used for a school that had students in it versus a school that was empty.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and Trustee Locke, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on a discussion this evening and the fact that Prince of Wales was closed as of June 30th, 2011, and that the motion to close Barrie Central was made in 2011, I have 4 motions that I would like to bring to the table. 2 dealing with Barrie Central Collegiate and 2 dealing with Prince of Wales Public School. And I do understand that they could be closed items, but I believe in our bylaws, it says it may go into closed, so I would just like your guidance.
Let me just, 2 seconds. You got it right there. Okay, so. So yeah, okay, so under section 2 of our bylaws with respect to committee meetings in closed session, pursuant to section 207(2) of the Education Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, a meeting of any committee of the board, including a committee of the whole board, may be closed to the public when the subject matter under consideration involves the security of the property of the board, the disclosure of intimate personal financial information in respect of any individual, including a member of the board or committee, an employee or prospective employee of the board, a student, or a person responsible for the care, custody of the student or a member of the public, the acquisition or disposal of the school site, decisions in respect of negotiations with employees of the board, and litigation affecting the board. So I do believe you're right, it doesn't have to be in closed session. So, I mean, at this point in time, if you want to move the motions, and then if people feel that we should be going into closed session, I think we can entertain that motion, or if people are comfortable moving forward, we can do it in public.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, motion number 1, that the Business and Facilities Standing Committee recommend that the board declare the Barrie Central Collegiate Institute secondary school site effective July 1st, 2016, will no longer be required for the purposes of the board dated November 5th, 2014. Motion number 2, that the Business and Facilities Standing Committee recommend that the board approve the disposition of the Barrie Central Collegiate Institute secondary school site in accordance with Ontario Regulation 444-98, with the closing date of the sale to take place after July 1st, 2016, dated November 5th, 2014. Prince of Wales Public motion number 1, that the Business and Facilities Standing Committee recommend that the board declare the Prince of Wales Public School site will no longer be required for the purposes of the board dated November 5th, 2014. And number 2, that the Business and Facilities Standing Committee recommend that the board approve the disposition of the Prince of Wales Public School site in accordance with Ontario Regulation 444/98, dated November 5th, 2014.
Okay, is there a seconder for these motions? Trustee Lang. So the motions are on the table at this point in time. They've been moved and they have been seconded. Our bylaws permit us to move forward in open session. If people are comfortable doing so, I'm quite prepared to move forward in open session. Okay, I see no one wanting to move at this time, that we go into close. So we do have the motions on the table, so we will entertain questions from trustees or in discussion with respect to these motions. And would you like to speak to the motions, Trustee Locke, as you move them?
I would. The decisions were made through our processes in 2011. We have a lot of schools that need repairs. We have a lot of schools that need supplies. And I just do not see the reason for holding on to these properties when our students need this money now.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions with respect to these motions? Trustee Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may not be the only one in the room that's gobsmacked. We have a history of having schools that are closed, and then we sell off the properties. We do not do it usually until after the children have actually left the school. We do that because there is, in fact, a potential for things not to go perfectly. And one of the problems, I guess, I'm having with this extraordinary set of motions is that it seems to me a bit like closing the barn door and triple bolting it, because we're going to make sure Barrie North gets that money and those kids go to Barrie North. And I have a real problem with this. I think if the idea is good, if the government supports it, and there is funding, that it will take place. You don't have to sell the property from underneath the children's feet. So I would like to know from the director, have we ever sold the property or put the property up for sale on a property where a school was still operational at the time the property went up for sale?
Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold tonight. To you, Madam Chair, I'm looking to David Few, who has an institutional memory, to ask me to go back. I'm not aware of the situation. We'd have to check, but I'm not aware.
Okay, Trustee May?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Madam Director, I think before we close the school and then sell off the land, it would probably be a good idea to have a report from the actual facilities department on the topic, given that we are not all experts at facilities and property management. And that would also allow the public to have some information and opportunities to provide input. Would it be possible for the director to ask for a report from the facilities department on potential items?
To you, Madam Chair, I'm not quite sure what this report would be on. I'm a little confused what you're asking for within this report. I think that this table has shared the facility issues that surround building. We have come forward with the information through an accommodation review regarding the situation. So please help clarify for me, what would you expect to see in this report that you feel you would need?
May I respond? Yeah. I would like to see a report that clarifies the board's position and recommendation of staff as to the appropriateness of selling the property at a time when there are still students in the property, when in fact we could need the property going into 2016, 2017, 2018, and potentially not get the funding even for the Barrie North consolidation project. So I guess what I'm asking for is the same kind of report we've gotten historically whenever one of these projects took place. And it comes to, I think of things like the Wyville area and some of the Duntroon area. Duntroon still hasn't been sold, for goodness sake. You know, there's a lot of properties we own, so we've always held on to them. So I'd like to know why this is different, and I'd like a proper report on the topic.
Superintendent Dance, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Lloyd, to Trustee Smith. The intent would be, I believe at this point, to have a sale conditional upon closure at a certain date. The building may be sold, but the sale would not be completed until that future date is set up by the determination of the trustees. The other aspect that may be interesting for trustees is the level of interest in the properties. We believe there is a level of interest in the properties that is significant. In the case that you referenced, Trustee Smith, Duntroon, it is in use. It is in use as a maintenance depot for our board. The same is true with Tecumseh North. The same is true with Wabasha Pines. There are facilities that, as you know, through the capital planning process, we've made surplus property an area for ourselves to be able to help fund projects, and that those funds have been put against projects on a number of occasions where we've been able to sell our properties. The Morning Annex is a good example of that recently, that brought a good deal of money into the board that helped to fund projects. So those are all aspects, but certainly the interest of in this property is one that we believe is there, that it may be at its zenith at this point.
Thank you. Moving on my speakers list, Trustee May, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted a clarification, because I don't think it says sell it out from underneath their feet right now. I think it said, like, once the date comes, and which we would have the information would come by then. I just wanted to clarify that for sure, that said that in the motion.
Yeah, and I think Superintendent Dan addressed that by saying the sale would be conditional upon the actual closure of the school. The school would not be closed, and the deal would not happen until the school was actually closed.
Yes, so my comment to that would be, so it wouldn't necessarily be putting the cart before the horse, because they say strike while the iron's hot. If there's interested proponents, which we know there are, I would be worried that come that date, have they moved on, and then we can't sell. That would be a concern for me at this point.
Thank you. Trustee Locke? Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to confirm that the motion for Barrie Central is dated for after the closure, and the motion to close in June 2016 passed in May 2011. And the motion for Prince of Wales, the Prince of Wales has been closed as of June 30th, 2011. So none of my motions state that I'm going to kick the kids to the street to sell this. Both of them are very dated differently and purposefully.
Thank you. And Trustee Armstrong, I believe you're next.
Thank you. I would agree that we have a report talking about the options whenever. We all know the options about school sites when there are school closures, typically elementary schools. The board has not closed a secondary school up until, two secondary schools, up until, for motions to close. Historically, I can't think of when that happened. I've been on the board for 16 years, so I guess I'm concerned in that I agree that the end result at some point in time will come if when closures happen, but it's highly unusual that the trustees have put this type of recommendation on the table. It's typically something that it's a signal from our staff saying, okay, we're ready to do the work to start to get a property for sale. I'm concerned it's somewhat premature. The motion's not the end result. Obviously, it's something happening in a couple of years hence. It's not affecting the students while they're in school. But I don't really care for the timing or the optics of the trustees bringing this to the table. This is something that I would prefer historically, that staff bring it to as a recommendation for trustees to consider. The end result most likely will be as these recommendations are, but I don't see November 2014 regular board meeting dealing with this. I feel that the optics are unusual. It's the end of a term, and then a term of board of trustees is coming. 2 years before school population leaves, that we're asking, we're putting these recommendations. It's not necessarily part of the package when you do have a closure either. When a closure occurs, it's not like number 7 or 8 that the sale happens. I don't believe that's part of the package. Usually, again, and I can ask the director for her input on that, but I think it's something that the staff signals to the table that it's time to get ready for putting a property up for sale. I just don't. I'm almost inclined to put a motion to lay this on the table because I just don't believe that this is the correct time to deal with this question. So I don't think the director can give any input on that about that's something that the staff usually signals to the table at the time to deal with disposition of property. I guess it's a question. Director Walden.
Through you, Chair. Typically, we as a staff will bring recommendations forward. You, as a table, you asked us to bring you the options. That is what we've done this evening. You asked us what were those options. In that discussion, we were asked to list to the Board of Trustees what we felt the options were. We also, though, must recognize that each one of these situations have a slight difference to them, based on information, based on circumstances, all kinds of other variables. So, back to your statement, however, it is not typically what we would do. That each situation is very different.
Okay, Trustee Locke and then Trustee Lay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report options is called Options for Use and Current Status, and the following are possible options. And it may be unusual, but it needs to be done at some point.
Trustee Lay?
Thank you very much. I've just spent 4.5 years of my life living Barrie Central. And I've been made well aware of the fact that the closure of Barrie Central is potentially the ruination of the downtown of the city of Barrie. Now, I live 6 blocks from Central, and I don't know if I want to live 6 blocks away from a building that sits empty in an area that isn't great to begin with. I think if we're going to give the city of Barrie any opportunity to save the downtown now that the school is going to close in 2016, I think that we have an obligation to sort of, I think Trustee Main said, strike when the iron is hot. I mean, we have people that are interested now. We had opportunities to sit in many meetings looking at an amazing proposal that could proceed with or without Central. And I think that it might be a very bad mistake for us to leave this too long, because I agree with Trustee Main as well. Potentially these people will lose interest. Barrie is hot now, potentially, but maybe in the future it won't be. And I think it scares me to think that we would end up putting the city of Barrie twice in the position of ruining their downtown by closing the school and then secondly by letting the building sit and rot. I think that it would be a better situation for the city to save the downtown if somebody could work on this property and put something amazing on it, or something that would at least potentially rejuvenate that part of the city. It needs a rejuvenation desperately. Things down in that area are not pleasant, and they're not leaving. They haven't left for the entire time I've lived in the downtown of Barrie. It's always been the same. So I have great hope that if this property sells, that someone is going to buy it, and they're going to do something amazing, and that will potentially save the downtown for the city of Barrie.
Thank you. Trustee Beacock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and through you to Superintendent Vance. One of the concerns is around the students and the timeline in terms of the closure. And I know in the past we have sold property and then leased it back for a period of time in order to accommodate for whatever reasons there might have been. In a situation like this, where there would be the potential for selling the property with an end date of 2016, is there something that could be put into the purchase that would guarantee that if the school is required, for whatever reason, as we're hearing around the table, that the school board would have an opportunity to lease it for a period of 1 more year or whatever it might be, if that was the case? And I'm curious about that, because I'd like to know that it's possible to put something like that into the sale, so that we did have that option later on.
Superintendent Dance, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Lloyd, Trustee Beacock, or Chair Beacock. It certainly is part of the negotiations of any sale agreement. We could look at that. It could be a conditional closure of the sale, closing at a date to be ascertained in the future. I think that is something that would be beyond the scope of the 2 motions at this point, but would certainly be the intent for staff to speak to how we would entertain these negotiations. So your question is a good one as far as whether it would be leased back, whether it would be to continue to have it available, as you referenced, into the future until a certain point. I think that that's where certainly, and we're getting close to the point where I think we may need to go into closed if we can speak frankly about what trustees and staff know about the situation with regard to the potential.
Trustee Smith, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. As I said, I'm concerned this is completely inappropriate at this time and this point in history. We know that the staff normally present recommendations to this effect. We also know that the likelihood that the public will perceive this as a slam dunk on the board's behalf is very likely. I am so concerned about this, I think we should go into closed session, and I would like to talk about the values of the property. And I also would like to make sure we have a recorded vote, whether it's in closed or in open.
Okay, thank you. I have exhausted my speakers list, so I'm going to take the opportunity to say a few words. There's nothing about Barrie Central and how we've dealt with Barrie Central that is the same as any other school we've dealt with. We have given no other school in this board the same consideration that we've given Barrie Central. We have never given any other school the same amount of time or opportunity to find a partnership. We have given preferential treatment, in my opinion, to Barrie Central. We worked endlessly and tirelessly to try and secure a partnership that did not come together. And for those trustees who attended the last meeting with the respondents, I know not all trustees were there, it was very clear that there is not a partnership. There is no potential partnership there anymore. There is no partnership. So we have to move forward on the recommendations that we passed in 2011, which is closing the school. But there is huge potential for that site. There is huge potential for the city of Barrie. And moving forward, in my opinion, is the best possible thing we could do as a board for the city of Barrie to give opportunity in the downtown and opportunity for that site. And I believe we need to move forward on this for the benefit of the city of Barrie. It's unfortunate that we couldn't make a partnership there. And you know, I've read numerous articles recently with respect to partnership, this type of partnership. And many of the articles say they're great in theory, very, very difficult to pull off in reality. Very few people have the money that's needed, very few people have the resources available, and they're very, very difficult to get an agreement in place. And we certainly put our best effort into doing so. We tried very hard, but we know there's huge potential for that site. And I think if we do not move forward and we wait until 2016 to start considering that potential will have walked, and the city of Barrie will have lost. And so I think, as much as it's disappointing to the community that we didn't reach a partnership and that we were not able to save Barrie Central and it's moving forward, the best thing I can do as a trustee and as a board member here is give Barrie the opportunity for something else at that site. And so I know it's unique. I know it's not how we've dealt with other sites, but there's nothing unique about, or there's nothing the same about Barrie Central and how we've handled the whole process in Barrie Central. So I'm quite prepared to think out of the box. I'm quite prepared to do something that may be different from the norm. I'm quite prepared to do something that I think is in the best interest of the city of Barrie, and especially the downtown core, because I know Mr. Lehman is very concerned about that, and the development of the downtown core. I think if we don't move forward on this and give an intent, downtown core will have lost this opportunity. Plain and simple. It will be gone. It will have walked. And they're not going to wait for us to decide July 2016 what we're doing, and for that process to take another year. So I really strongly think we need to consider this, and I think we need to take action tonight if we truly are concerned about the best interests of the town, of the city of Barrie and the downtown core. Trustee Locke?
Just a point of clarification that the property values are in the EFD2, so they are in public currently right now. And just one question, have we ever kept a school going longer than what the motion from the board stated is the closure date? Lieutenant Dan, please.
Thank you. And through Chair Lloyd and Trustee Locke, yes, we have. Prince of Wales Public School was kept open for a year while construction continued. Hillcrest Public School, that's the most recent example I put.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Okay. no other motions. So at this point in time, we've asked for a recorded vote on these motions, and so I will hand it over. Pardon? We have moved them as a package. I believe you moved them as a package, and they were seconded. So I will hand it over to Superintendent Sims to do the recorded vote.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. A recorded vote has been requested on the motions on the table. All those in favor of the motions, please stand. Trustee Locke, Trustee Lay, Trustee Williams, Trustee Lloyd. All those opposed to the motion, please stand. Trustee Smith, Chair Beacock, Trustee Armstrong. All those abstaining. Trustee May. The motion passes 4-3 with 1 abstain.
Okay, so that matter has been dealt with, unless there's any further discussion with respect to this report. Okay, so that takes us on to contract awards within approved budget. Superintendent Jeff, please.
Thank you, Chair White. The report that I'm reporting tonight is the contracts that have been awarded within approved budget for the month of October. I would like to just deal with one up front, and that's the supply and delivery of air filters that was submitted by GAPCO Filtration Group. You may have already noticed that the